Welcome to Paper Defiance, a fortnightly podcast all about indie bookshops and their owners. My name is Alex, and I'm recording this on Wadawurrung land in Ballarat, Australia. It's exciting to have you join me. In this episode, I am beyond excited to be talking to Jeannine A. Cook, who has two bookshops, Harriett's Bookshop in Pennsylvania and Ida's Bookshop in New Jersey in the United States. It's fair to say I'm a bit starstruck in this interview, so please forgive me if I sound a little bit giddy at times. Jeannine talks about some of the amazing experiences she's had in the last 3 years. And yes, she is another person who opened a bookshop at the start of 2020, and she is still going strong. In fact, it would be fair to say she's going from strength to strength, as you'll hear.
Well, I am Jeannine A. Cook. And it's such an interesting question, right? Like, okay, outside of your name, now what? And there's so many facets to my experience. I'm experiencing myself as a business owner right now because I have two bookshops. I consider myself to be the shopkeeper of those bookshops and kind of moving away from that language of ownership in that way. But I think overall I'm a creative being, and I've had an experience where I get to play out that creativity and use it in a lot of places. As an educator, I use it there. As an organizer, I use it there. And now I'm doing like some policy stuff, using it there. And then of course as a writer.
If we could start by talking about the bookshops, which is how I first heard about you and found out about you. I'm an Australian. I know little bits and pieces about American history, but it's not really part of our education. Your bookshops are named for like people that I recognise, but I don't really know much about why Harriett and Ida actually make sense as people to name bookshops after. Can you talk just a little bit about why you chose their names?
Yeah. I mean, and that's exactly why, right? Like that reason right there is exactly why we've done it, because we understand that our right and our responsibility is to the people who've come before us, who paved this amazing path. And it's just so happened that those same people were also people who were shunned by history, the way that it's been told thus far. And so we've taken on like that as a cool and imaginative opportunity to say, how do we avenge these ancestors who endured things that I couldn't imagine, and still, and still they stood, and still they sat, and still they ran, and still they stood, and so that, to me, that's just, it's the greatest job you could have. Yeah, so I mean, I could go into the history, but I would invite folks to like jump into like, doing some self-exploration around who these women might be. I have lots up if you decide to, just even Google us. You'll learn plenty. Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that Harriet's was the first bookshop that you opened and then Ida came second?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Given all of the different things that you have been and are, how did you get to the point of even wanting to open the bookshop?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a multitude of things. This is, I come from a line of, what we call in West Africa, we call them griots. It's a people who are like typically like the storytellers of a people, right? And so I think that, when I look back, whether that's, because somebody in my family was a preacher or a teacher or, something in storytelling is always present. And so I think that I believe it's a part of that. I think that also, my mother was a librarian when I was little. My parents were both they were both avid readers and avid discussers of books and of what they were, so I think it's a kind of all those things combined in many ways. And then also looking at my world and being like, damn, why don't we have something like this? Like you know? Like, I just wish we had, and then filling in that blank and seeing what happened.
You did that terrible thing where you thought someone should do something about this, and then you realize it's
It was
you.
me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I often say that that's like Harriet and that's Ida and them whispering and saying, like, if Harriet would have told me that this bookshop was gonna be the bookshop that it has become, right? Like, I probably would have been like, no, you got to find somebody else. I can't do it. No, not qualified.
When did Harriet's Bookshop officially open its doors?
February of 2020. Yeah, February 1st. So we just turned 3 years old last week.
That's very exciting.
It is very
Congratulations.
exciting. Yeah, and I don't know if you know this in Australia, but out here, like, that's like, a miracle almost to have a business open and at the time that it opened and to survive what it survived.
Yes.
And in our world, like, especially businesses owned by people who look like me, they're not thriving. They're not thriving. They're closing as fast as they open sometimes, and so that's a little scary and not, or at least it's a frontier that I think gives us great opportunity. I'll say that.
The positive spin, excellent.
Right? Yeah.
So I love bookshops. I love the spaces, and I love hearing about the way that they're actually set up. For me, is really fascinating. So when you were looking for a space and you were actually thinking about what it was going to look like, were there things that you really wanted to include in the physical space itself?
Yeah, I was really interested in collaboration. And all of it is really, and it's just like almost like an experiment in collaboration, because I was like, okay, well, what happens if, we work with artists and artists get to like imagine themselves in this space, or like what happens if an artist gets to take a book and reinterpret that book as a space, like what, so like I had these questions that I thought felt fun. I'm also like, in my design, you see that there's a lot of minimalism. And so it's kind of the opposite of what we've been told in retail world. Like, they're like, oh no, more, 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 more. And it's just like, no, no, no.
I suspect that makes for a really fascinating space to be in. Do you find that people kind of wander in and just feel, I don't know, intrigued, or, do people seem to enjoy being in the space?
Yeah, they do. They do. And even before we opened, it was like there was something there, before we even opened. The woman who did the first article on Harriet's, and I tell people all the time, like, I never sent out press releases. I never was like, like, that was never the vibe, It was just like people wandering in and talking about it and hearing about it. But that first woman, she was just like, she wrote this whole article about how it felt. And I was like, wow. Yeah, that's exactly how I want people to feel. That's how I want. That's how I know we need to feel more often. I mean, and it's had many iterations. I don't know if you've seen, like, if you scroll, like, Harriet's has looked so many different ways.
Yes.
And so has Ida's. It's just, yeah, it's interesting to me.
Is that because of a desire from you to keep exploring new ideas and to keep kind of reinterpreting what the space looks like?
I almost think of it like, I don't know, in some ways it's almost like clothing. It's like the bookshop is changing its clothing. And then in some ways it's like, it's just ready for a new feeling. I can't really describe that other than just to like do it. So I just do it, Yeah.
I've had a bit of a look through your websites, and as it's looking at the pictures and the sort of merchandise and the books and so on that you have, could you talk a little bit about, I guess, what sort of stock, what sort of books you are particularly interested in having in the shop? Like, what's your focus there?
Yeah, so the shop celebrates women authors, women artists, and women activists. And at the time when we were opening, I was really particularly interested in this idea of really celebrating the activists in our society, and that they often put themselves on the line in this way. And then there's no true payment for what, you can't pay for what Harriet Tubman did. We can't really pay her. And even in her time, she didn't get paid to be a general in the army, because she was a woman. And so there's that another interesting like exploration that I'm having through the shops is like, what does it mean to be a part of a society that doesn't, you have to teach it how to care for you. You have to teach it how to love you because it doesn't naturally do it. So yeah, those are kind of the places that it's taken me.
Obviously, again, Australia, America, different sorts of contexts.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
I kind of want to ask how people reacted when you told them this was the sort of bookshop you wanted to open.
That was coming. Yeah. Okay, so I have a concept now, and I recently named it because I was just like, I want people to understand what's happening. It helped me to even understand what's happening, which is this idea of like proof of concept, And so it's like because sometimes the visions don't make sense. I'm either not good at explaining it or it's like, what are you talking about? So because of that, I've learned that it's easier for me to just create the thing that I'm talking about and then like show it to people and say like, see, this is what I'm saying. Because it doesn't work that great the other way around. You could tell by even like when I was trying to find space, it was like, people didn't really understand what I was trying to do. And also like when you say you're doing books in this day and time, people are kind of like, oh yeah, right. Only for there to be like this amazing like book movement that parallels the uprising, right? But also for there to be this, book renaissance among like TikTok where folks are wanting to read vintage books and they're wanting to read used books. And so like there's this whole but that those people from 2019 couldn't imagine what was about to happen. I couldn't either, but it worked out in a certain way. Yeah. And so yeah, I mean, people, I think that the initial responses were a little, off. And even after I had, put up, I built, we started, I still have people, because I'm in a neighborhood that has a racial tension. And I don't know if there's an equivalent of that in where you are.
Yes. Yep.
Those tensions mean that you really don't know what will arise from them and how they'll unfold. So that meant that sometimes we did get threats and sometimes we did get spoken to disrespectfully or inappropriately or, and then we also had this huge pandemic and we were a brand new business and nobody had anything in mind for like what to do for a business that was only 6 weeks old. It's like it was a newborn baby business. And no one was like, oh yeah, we got to make sure we take care of you newborn babies, even though they should have been, and so that took time for people to come around to that understanding.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad that you have existed, that you do exist. And I guess in terms of what you said earlier about how I guess businesses in general, particularly such young ones struggling with the pandemic, how did you then have to me, how did you then have the guts to open a second bookshop as well? That seems particularly gutsy.
Yeah. Or crazy. You can say crazy.
No, I love bookshops. I wouldn't say crazy. I would say
right. No,
unexpected, perhaps.
Yes, definitely. For you and me, I would say. Because how it has worked thus far for me is that, and this is at least how my experience is, like I'm having these conversations with these women, and sometimes in those conversations, like with Ida, when I go back and look at the video that they made of the opening of Harriet's, they asked us to talk about, each one of us had to name someone that we were like, we were walking with through this experience. And my person was Ida B. Wells. And then when I look back at that video, I was like, wait, oh my gosh, like that was a clue. I didn't even realize it, and so it's, and the next thing you know, I'm like in Springfield, Mississippi. Like I walked her walk. I had to go back to where she was from. I had to go to Memphis. I had to sit with her newspaper. I had to, like, there were some things that I had to do that, like, the behind the scenes work of this is really serious stuff. I was like stuck in Mississippi. I didn't know nobody in Springfield, and they don't even have a good like Uber system. I'm coming from the north, so I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just take an Uber. Like so ignorant. so ignorant. And so yeah, and Ida continued to talk to me until I was like, yeah, I think I can do this, and I think we can do this, and it's a community effort. It's not, I don't do this by myself, right? Like I'm doing the interviews and whatnot, but that's why I said I'm the shopkeeper, but I'm not. The shop is run by many people, and both of them are. Now it's expanding, and so part of that is really beautiful to look at and see, like, that the community takes on the shop in this way. It becomes a part of a people, and challenges its places as well. Like it's many things, and so that's just cool. It's been a cool experience to watch. I didn't expect it. So yeah, gutsy, a little crazy. Octavia E. Butler talks about the positive obsession.
Yes,
and I'm pretty sure that's what I have at this point. Because I'm not even done. I'm not done. This summer I go to France. I do a pop-up for Josephine
Baker. Wow.
Baker in Paris. Yeah. So it's like, it's not over. And that's a pop-up, of course, and they might all be pop-ups, who knows, but it is it's an amazing experience.
Oh, that just sounds like such an exciting idea as well. Baker was just incredible. I think she was, an astonishing person and a great person to kind of follow in that kind of the naming and the inspiration idea of the shop.
Yeah, for me too. Like that, it's like every time I get to like walk with one of them, that means that I kind of get to, I get to go down these like really interesting paths. Right now, we're doing a trolley tour in dedication to Mrs. Rosa Parks. And so I get to like learn these women in a way that I hadn't learned them before. And I get, I get to have like a deeper conversation, and then I also get to share that with people. And so, I've been telling everybody, and I'll tell you too, is like, if you get a chance to just spend, 10 minutes with Miss Rosa Parks, spend 10 minutes with Mrs. Rosa Parks and see where she takes you. She is an amazing, amazing spirit.
Do you find that you have these sorts of conversations with the people who walk into the shops as well, who want to talk about their own experiences or kind of connections to people like Harriett and Ida and so on?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because it is a like it's not just me. Like I've met many people who have very similar experiences that I've had, where it's just like, oh yeah, I was interested in her when I was little, and I used to read that book, and yeah, it's very interesting. People will come in like, oh, I have a tattoo. I had a lady that came in with this huge Harriett tattoo.
Wow.
I had this couple that got married on the Combahee River, after Harriett. I've met so many. I met a little boy from, he was just so fascinated by Harriet Tubman. He was in 3rd grade. His dad said, I just had to bring him down here to meet you because he's so fascinated by this woman. So yeah, the stories go on and on. The same thing with Ida. I had a professor like I was talking to yesterday. She was just like, oh, I run the center for Ida B. Wells up at this, so it's like lots of cool connections. It's really, really, like I tell everybody, like, I got the best job in the world. I'm trying to do my best to keep my job. I don't want to get fired.
You said before that you had found it surprising how the communities had kind of, accepted and welcomed the bookshops.
Yeah.
Have there been other things over the last few years? And we'll just kind of set the pandemic to one side because
surprises.
Have there been positive surprises?
The ultimate surprise.
What sort of things spring to mind?
Oh my gosh! Oh my goodness! There's so many positive surprises. That's what I love. I love it. I'm like, where do I even start? There's so many. So last summer, I got sent to Paris, right, to follow James Baldwin's footsteps through this like Baldwin Institute,
Oh, wow.
and
Wow.
right, 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 exactly. So that was like a whole thing. That was just one little thing. Like, it's so many. This amazing guy down in North Carolina. I'm telling you stuff that's like last week, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So this guy, Ed MacArthur, down in North Carolina, him and his wife had a bookshop in the 80s, an amazing collection. They were very close friends with Dr. Maya Angelou. And so they have a very big signed Maya Angelou collection. And they were like, Jeannine, come down. We just want you to, we want to meet you, da 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 da, and you can come like look through the collection. He has some stuff that he had for sale. Well, last week he calls me, and it's sad, but it's not horrible, right? Like, because he called me and said, Jeannine, I want to tell you, my wife passed away, and I was like, oh no, Mr. McCarty, like we had such a great time together when we were down. And I was like, I'm so sorry to hear it. And he was like, and we want to make sure that, the collection gets into the right hands. So we thought that it would make the most sense to just give you a call, and like we'll take you to go see what you had, the rest of everything. And I'm just like, what, what beauty is that, to be trusted in that way and to be thought of in that way, and to like, it's just it's just like, whoa, I mean, so the unexpected, I mean, and then like all the media stuff, like I'm really shy, I'm talking to you, and which is fine, and I still ain't turned the camera on. So that's the whole thing. But it's like, that's from Vogue magazine to Oprah to MSNBC, there's not there's BBC, there's, it's just so many things. New York Times, like, it's just like, Today Show, to have Al Roker say your name on a Today Show is just like, are you kidding? I used to watch Al Roker when I was a kid. Viola Davis, who just got that EGOT yesterday, who sent us 100 signed copies of her book. And, like, there's this, it goes on. Will Smith launches his book with Harriet's Bookshop. Michelle Obama launches her book with Harriet's Bookshop. Like, I could go on. It's like miraculous. It is. It really, it's like nothing I ever could have dreamed of imagining. And so much thanks and gratitude for sure. I believe that I'm a part of I call it like almost like a spectrum of freedom, and that there's a certain spirit that has traveled through the lands for as far back as we can remember, and that ancient spirit continues to travel from generation to generation. And I think that I'm just a part of a really important legacy of storytelling, and so they I think that's I mean, that's the only, I can't explain it otherwise. So that's how I explain it to myself. So that it has to be a part of something much larger.
In your wildest dreams, Jeannine, do you see yourself opening more bookshops or doing other things in that space, or is sort of 2 bookshops enough and then you go on to do other things?
There's so many interesting things happening now that, I'm like, oh, I wonder where this takes me. Like, I got an antiquarian fellowship, so now I'm learning about used and rare books,
Wow.
And so, right. And so and for my project, my end of of my fellowship, I've pitched a TV show that allows me to just like, you could record me going and like doing this. I call it Book Hunters, where I'm like going into people's libraries and into people's bookshops, and like, taking everybody with me on these journeys. And also like looking for and finding rare books and opening the conversation about, who owns what, and like, where does this belong, and where has this been? And it's so there's so many like interesting things there. I've been working on my memoir for this last year, and so
wonderful.
That's almost there. So that's a whole different, like, who knows where that's going to take us, that's, who knows? I just don't, so there's like all of these little things that I'm just doing what I feel called to do, and who knows, So I don't know, maybe, if it, if it, sometimes it's like, even with Collins, with Ida's bookshop, like the mayor called me and said, Jeannine, we heard you might be interested in opening a bookshop in Collinsville. Like, this is me calling you to tell you, like, this is the mayor saying we'll do whatever it takes to make that happen, So it was like, you don't, it's just like, well, that was really nice, that that meant a lot.
I really feel like that this just needs a watch this space. Jeannine A. Cook is really going places. Has been places and will continue to be amazing to watch.
Yeah, well, it's been amazing for me too, and I'm happy to be on a journey with everyone. It is quite the journey, yeah.
Jeannine, I have one last question, which is,
Sure.
What are you reading at the moment?
Oh, great question. So I have been reading The Body Keeps the Score, which is, I have to read it very slow because it's about trauma in the body, and I could only read little bites at a time I want to understand like some of the things that I've experienced in my childhood and like how those things are affecting me and if there are things I can do about those things. And I know that I'm not alone in that of being a person that's had trauma, So, but I have to read that slow. I just finished Getting Lost by Annie Arnaud, and people are like, "You're reading Annie Arnaud." So that's so funny to me. But I was just like, well, she just got that Nobel Prize. Like, I want to know why, like, what is it? So I've been reading through her stuff for the last few weeks. And then in between there, I had slipped in this Lucille Clifton memoir, which was, oh my God, it was so good. Like, I didn't even mean to read the whole thing like that. Like, I just, you ever pick up something and then next thing you know, you're like in it, and you're like, oh shoot, I wasn't expecting this to take me like all the way out there. So that just happened.
Hi, I'm Amy, and one of my favorite bookshops is called Powell's. Wrapped around what seems like a full city block in downtown Portland, Oregon, one would be hard-pressed not to make this a favorite, simply because it is so large, it is bound to contain several of anyone's favorite books at any given moment. I always end up making for the classic literature section because they're destined to have something I've always wanted to read, but haven't made any effort to get from any other source. Classics of note to my own shelves include very nicely used copies of Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice. The problem? I have been lost twice in this bookshop. In fact, so incredibly lost that I have actually had to be found. Fortunately, these days, they now offer a map and, if absolutely necessary, ladders.
Thanks for listening to this 11th episode. And if you think I'm not amused and bemused by talking to someone who has also featured on Oprah and in Vogue, well, think again. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review, or just tell someone else about it. You can find Paper Defiance on Twitter as Paper Defiance Pod, on Instagram as Paper Defiance, on Facebook as Paper Defiance Podcast, and we are also on YouTube. This podcast is created and produced by me, Alexandra Pierce. The music is called Loopster by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find the attribution at paperdefiance.com.